I'm about out of patience here. Have to try heat. Whoa! Ugh, yeah! Yeah! Today on One Road, I'm replacing this lower ball joint in my 2005 Toyota 4Runner. Now, I literally just got done replacing this upper ball joint, filmed the whole process, and made a video about it. And so if you're one of the ones that saw that upper ball joint video and heard me say that I was immediately going to start working on the lower ball joint, well, here I am. Yes, that's right. I'm only a few minutes after I finished filming for the upper ball joint, and I'm gonna get started right now on this lower ball joint. So the first thing I need to do is remove this C-clip here. It's moving. That's a good sign. Now this thing is spring loaded, so I have my eye protection on. Woo! That thing went flying. Next step is to remove this cotter pin down here. I'll simply bend it back so that it can be pulled through the hole. And with a few taps on this side, I was able to get the cotter pin to come out on this side so I can see the hole there. All right, and looks like we're getting the cotter pin out. There we go. And now I have my stubby impact on here. I'm gonna try to back this nut off. Perfect. There we go. I put some preload on there, hit it a couple of light taps with the hammer, and that thing just busted right off. That was awesome. So with this lower mount now removed, we have complete access to this lower ball joint. And if we look really close here, you can see we have the same style spring-loaded band, I guess you call it. In order to take this off, you have to get a pick up under one side of it, just like that, okay? There we go. And this is coming off quite nicely. That's it. Now that this thing's out of the way, I can remove the boot itself. Here's what the inside of that boot looks like. And here's a quick side-by-side with the new MOOG ball joint. Now this 4Runner has 236,000 miles on it. I would assume these ball joints have been replaced in the past, but I just don't know. Judging off the corrosion and everything on the top here, they do look to be original. I have the ball joint press set up with a couple of different cups down here in order to make that work. We do have the stud to deal with, so I had to use two different cups stacked on top of each other in order to make this work. If you saw the video for the upper ball joint here, you would have seen me cut this stud off, which is right here, and that's because there was no cup adapters or anything that would have worked with that stud on there. In this case, on the lower ball joint, I think we're good. Everything is lubed up. I got the threads lubed up here. Now what I like to do after I have some load on here is just hit it a few times. And that's just to potentially help break up any of the corrosion or anything going on in there. I'm hoping everything's lined up correctly. Let me stand up here. Okay, I'm gonna back it off and recheck everything because I don't see it moving at all. What is going on, man? Got through it. Everything's lined up. Stud has been removed. There should be nothing holding us up. I'm about out of patience here. Have to try heat. I don't know what else to do. I mean, I don't know what else to do, guys. Whoa! Did you see that? It just popped. Woo-hoo-hoo! Yes! Ugh, yeah! Yeah! That was awesome. I'm trying to inspect inside this hole to see why that was so difficult to remove, and I think you can clearly see that thing was rust welded in there. And here's that other side, same situation, just rust everywhere. So before I can install my new lower ball joint, I have to clean some of this up. Just gonna get in here and try to scrub some of this out. Doesn't have to be perfect. There's still a little bit of corrosion in there, but I did scrub it down, so we should be good to go. And taking a look at our new MOOG ball joint here, this thing does look really nice. And I'm really stoked that they designed the boot to be so slim profile. That means I don't have to take this thing off when I'm trying to fit the cups and everything with the press. So everything should go together fairly nicely. I am a little curious what kind of a grease fitting that is though. Don't think I've ever seen one. And so this will simply slide underneath and be pressed in. And here's how I situated the press. You can see the cup situation that I chose. I'll go ahead and place my impact here just to get it started. This is good news. I can literally see it going in. I just wanted to double check here that nothing was being bound up. This top cup that I have here is barely big enough for the actual ball joint, but if I have it off center a little bit, it's possible it could catch the ball joint and end up binding up. Oh. Everything's put back together, so hopefully we can fully seat this ball joint. Well, I had to switch to my breaker bar because that little stubby just doesn't have, I also don't have a great compressor for that, but it just doesn't have the power needed. Okay, so taking a peek, you can see the ball joint is totally flush with that lower control arm. There's no space at all, and we are completely installed. All I have to do is put in that little retaining clip, and it's even all the way around. There we go. There we go. And I'm gonna grab one of the ears. There we go. Now I know that this is fully seated because I was able to grab one of the ears and push it around and it stayed in its groove. So this is fully seated. This C-clip protects this ball joint from falling back out somehow. Well, this lower ball joint is officially installed. What a rodeo that was. I feel beat up like a rodeo clown. I mean, this was not easy. I wouldn't say it was terribly difficult, but it was up there. And really that just comes down to having to figure out the right combination of the cups and everything to work to press out and press in these ball joints. And that little bit of corrosion, especially on this bottom ball joint, I mean, you saw that. I had to use the torch and heat up the lower control arm around the ball joint. And then I was cranking down on that press, and it wasn't until I was hitting it with the hammer that the thing popped. I've never had to use a torch before on anything that I've been working on with my vehicles. This was the first time. So honestly, it was a good learning experience on just how that process works, and it really works good. It works efficiently. Because what's actually happening by heating up this lower ball joint, the hole there, the hoop, it's expanding. And as it's expanding, it's breaking up that rust corrosion in there. So tapping it with the hammer helped because it helped to break everything up. And you saw that just pop right through. And by the way, I did have a fire extinguisher handy just in case. You always want to be ready. Now let's quickly recap here. How did I get here? Why did I change the lower ball joint and the upper ball joint? Well, it's because initially I went to go and swap out the CV axle that had a leaking CV axle boot. This outboard boot was leaking pretty bad. It was flinging grease all over the inside of the tire and all over everything else. So I knew I had to swap out the CV axle. It was an aftermarket CV axle anyway, so I wasn't worried about rebooting it. So I wanted to just buy a new CV axle, which I did, and swap it in. However, upon putting everything back together, I learned that the original factory Toyota knuckle that was here, the bottom two bolts that attached this lower control arm to the knuckle, those bolt holes were totally stripped out, unusable. And so rather than trying to jump through a million hoops on how I could re-tap that and all that, I decided to buy a new knuckle. Well, it's like one of those things, while you're there, you might as well. You know, I already had the knuckle off to change it. And so since the knuckle's off, I mean, how often is that gonna happen? I might as well switch out the ball joints. I mean, you just kind of have to do that. Now that we have the new upper ball joint, the new lower ball joint, my new CV axle hanging here by this wire, I am ready in the very next video. I am ready to put the brand new steering knuckle in and get everything finally put back together. That will be the very next video though. So please, if you enjoyed this one, if you enjoyed watching me struggle, and maybe perhaps learning a thing or two about how you can better change your ball joints. Maybe you saw me make a few mistakes and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna do that. That'll make my job easier. I don't know. Hopefully this helped in some way. If it did, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up. It helps this video and the whole channel. And also, if you've watched this far and you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. I'm Jimmy with One Road, and I will see you in the next one.